Daughters of Science Anatomy. And I'm Mrs. Bolton, and we're going to talk about glands today. Another one of our fascinating, I laugh, ah, accessory organs. And that's part 6 of our Skin and Integumentary System series. Okay, so let's talk about cutaneous glands. These are the glands that are found in the dermis, cutaneous referring to skin. Um, so just like with the hair, it is the epidermis pushed down into the dermis, exactly the same thing as how these cutaneous glands form. And all of them make secretions of one sort or another. All of them are what we call exocrine glands, which means the secretions come to the surface by way of a duct system, like a little plumbing that goes on there. Other glands in your body, such as your thyroid gland or your pancreas, those are endocrine glands that don't have a duct. Okay, so the first gland we're going to talk about is sebaceous gland, and they make a substance called sebum. This is made up primarily of some oil and some cell debris and things like that. The job of sebaceous glands is to lubricate the hair and the skin. They keep the hair from being brittle. If you have long hair or you have been unkind to your hair by chemically treating it with dye or perhaps perm or a chemical perm or a chemical straighten, or even using a lot of heat, flat irons, curling irons, things like that, that actually kind of wears away the surface of the hair, and this sebum actually kind of keeps it from being brittle. However, because in the 21st century we wash our hair, most people wash their hair fairly often, as opposed to the 1800s where they washed it maybe once a month, whether they needed it or not. Oftentimes the hair, the sebaceous glands can't make enough sebum to keep up, so the hair goes dry and brittle, and so we need to have some conditioner that kind of is, maybe you want to say it's like faux sebum. So it also helps to kill bacteria. Back in the 1800s, when they didn't take baths very often, one of the things that young girls or even older girls did is they would brush their hair every day, 100 strokes or whatever. And what they were doing is they were taking that oil that was up by their scalp on the hair, and they were distributing that through all the length of their hair. So that's what that was all about. So these guys empty into hair follicles. Here's a hair follicle here, and this is the dermis, of course, and the epidermis is up here. And these little hair follicles, they kind of look like little cauliflower that are hanging off the side of the sebaceous glands, look like cauliflower hanging off the side of a hair follicle. So these become more active during adolescence. That's why a lot of times when the transition from childhood to adolescence, sometimes kids don't realize that they need to bathe as often as they do, and wash their hair as often as they do. So oftentimes their hair looks a little bit on the greasy side. It's because they haven't washed it away. The reason that they're more active in adolescence is because there's more testosterone in both sexes. Yes, girls, you do in fact have testosterone, and yes, boys, you do in fact have a little bit of estrogen. It's just which one do you have more of kind of determines which sex you are, biologically. Sometimes these sebaceous glands get clogged, and probably at some point in your development you have had a whitehead, which is a pimple that tends to have a little bit of sebum trapped inside. It's not open to the outside. And here's a nice example of a whitehead right here. And this is kind of a cartoony. Hello, what is going on here? I don't know. Let's go back. There we are. So we have a whitehead right here, and this is a cartoon version of what's going on here. these sebaceous glands get clogged up here from dead skin cells or dirt or something that gets in there. And the sebaceous glands don't understand what's going on, so they just keep making sebum, and it good Lord, I don't know what's going on there. Let us go back. Weird, weird, weird. Okay, so I won't touch that picture anymore. So the sebaceous gland just keeps producing the sebum, and it gets trapped under the skin, and there's no way for it to get out, and it can actually become very painful because it presses on some of the nerves that are nearby. A blackhead is open to the outside, and here's a picture of some blackheads. A lot easier to get rid of blackheads because they are open to the outside if you clean them regularly. Now, one of my favorite shows on TV is Dr. Pimple Popper, and she deals, like, this would be like heaven for her because she loves digging those things out. She also deals with much, much bigger issues than this, but really, really fascinating. So you should probably get a hold of some of her videos. They're very interesting. So the reason that the blackhead is black at the top, because it's open to the outside and some of the oil that's inside has oxidized. And when it does that, it turns black. You have other glands that are kind of sebaceous-y, called meibomian glands, and these are a type of sebaceous gland that empties into the follicles of your eyelashes. Sometimes you get an infected meibomian gland, and it creates something called a condition called a sty. And this is an example of a sty. One of those gets infected and it becomes very, very painful. And here's kind of an interesting thing. If you don't get them on a regular basis, sometimes if you get them on a regular basis, they have to actually cut out the little hair follicle. But if you get them, you know, not very frequently, one of the things that you can do is take some black tea, just regular old Salada or Tetley tea. Make yourself a little cup of tea, but keep the tea bag. And when the tea is cool enough for you to actually touch and not burn you, take a little bit of the tea on the tea bag and just set it on where you have the sty. And do that for like half an hour, 20 minutes, you know, something like that. And what happens is the black tea actually has an acid in it called tannic acid, which will kill the bacteria that's causing the infection of the meibomian gland. So that's kind of a good thing to do. The other thing that happens is the heat will cause the opening of that gland to be open so that the tea can get down in there and kill. So the heat helps, and the tannic acid in the black tea. There's another thing that that is associated with meibomian glands, which is kind of interesting. There are some mites that live in the meibomian glands of a large percentage of the population. Yes, in fact, you may be one of those that have little mites living in there. Now, it's not a big whoop. You have bacteria living all over the surface of your body. They don't bother you for the most part. One of the things that they do is at night, they're nocturnal. So at nighttime, they go from your meibomian glands and then run down to your nose and eat the secretions from your nose. Yes, in fact, they do eat your boogers. Have a little picnic there, and then they run back. If you are curious about these, if you're having a sleepover with some friends, you might inspect them in the middle of the night to see if they have these mites that live there. They're very, very tiny, so you're going to have to look carefully, and they usually are in the dark. So what you're going to have to do is to take a flashlight and get really close to them and then shine the flashlight on their face, the person's face, and then look really, really quickly. You probably, just a word of warning here, you probably won't be asked back for another sleepover if you do this often or at all. So word will get out. So if you're really curious about them, it might be worth it, but otherwise you might just have to believe. So here's a picture of a eyelash right here, and then you have the little mites that are living in the meibomian gland that's at the base of it. Okay, next type of glands are sudoriferous glands, and these are sweat glands. There are a couple of different types of those. The first type, which is the most numerous in the body, are called eccrine glands, and they kind of look like this yellow spaghetti. Okay, all of this tubing down here eventually comes to the surface in a duct. So there it is. It's very widespread on your neck, forehead, your back, pretty much everywhere on your body. And they open to directly to the surface of the skin in a pore. These are your typical sweat glands. The secretions that they make, if you wanted to whip some of this up this weekend, if you had a little extra time, mostly it's water. Also some sodium and waste like urea, uric acid, and also some vitamin C. They're most active when you have increased body temperature, when you're under stress, or if you're exercising, which usually increases your body temperature. So here's an interesting fact. On a hot day, you can lose about 7 liters of water through your eccrine glands. So it's really important on really hot days, if you're going to be outside, that not only do you take in a substantial amount of water, but you need to eat something salty so that you kind of hang on to those secretions and you don't dehydrate. The eccrine glands are not smelly at all. Okay, the ones that are smelly are the apocrine glands. And these are the blue spaghetti over on the other side here of our diagram. So where do you find these? In your armpits and your groin area. And these usually open into a hair follicle as well. So sebaceous glands and apocrine glands both open into hair follicles. And if you wanted to make some apocrine secretions, here's the recipe. It's pretty much the same stuff as the eccrine glands, except it has some fatty acids, and fatty acids tend not to be water soluble. They kind of hang out there. You also get a little vitamin D that gets secreted there. The secretions themselves actually are not smelly. However, the bacteria that live on the skin that like to feast on the fatty acids, they are, when they've eaten a lot, just like anyone else, they burp and they fart, and they give off a smelly gas. So it's the bacteria that eat the secretions that are smelly. So kind of a good idea to wash those areas really well so that the smell doesn't hang around. They're usually inactive until puberty, and puberty screws everybody over pretty much. They increase in activity if you're emotionally upset, scared, or in pain. And if there aren't 3 things that describe puberty, it's emotionally upset, scared, and in pain, like all the time. So that's why they increase during puberty. Again, another reason why people need to shower a little bit more often, because these things start kicking into high gear during puberty. Ceruminous glands are another type of gland that is in your body. You find these in your external ear, and they make earwax. Earwax is there kind of as a waterproofing thing to help keep things out of your ear. Little bugs and things like that get trapped in the earwax, or it helps with a little bit of waterproofing as well. Mammary glands are also cutaneous glands. They're modified sweat glands that produce milk. And the other thing that is big in the gland world is regulation of body temperature. It's really, really important. That has nothing to do with mammary glands, by the way. But it's really, really important. And your deep body temperature has to be like somewhat around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit on average. the heat, there's a lot of heat produced by reactions in your body, and you have to make sure that it's a fine balance between having too much heat and not enough heat. So you have these reactions that are happening all the time in your body. Really, really important that you keep that heat balance. So the more active cells like muscle and liver produce a lot of heat. So we use the process of sweating to help balance that out. Well, that's it for glands. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.